welcome to the Best Fleets to Drive For podcast. I'm Mark Morrell, co-creator of the Best Fleets to Drive For program, and I am joined, as usual these days, by my partner in crime, Trish Bethel, our Best Fleets program manager. And today we are very excited to be joined by Tammy Cryderman, general manager of Kriska. And Kriska is a company that has been part of the Best Fleets program for years now and always have lots of really interesting things to talk about. So, Tammy, we are going to grill you on all of the things that you do there. But before we get into that, let's start with just a little quick overview of the company and sort of your history with the company. And for anybody who isn't that familiar with Kriska, just sort of bring them up to speed.
Well, good afternoon, Trish and Mark. My name is Tammy Cryderman, as Mark said, and I'm the general manager at Kriska. I've been a general manager for about 7 years. Been with Kriska for, it'll be 30 years actually next week. And Kriska's based, our head office is in Prescott, Ontario, which is where I'm sitting today. We also have a large terminal in Mississauga, Ontario. And we have yards in Montreal, Ottawa, Ingleside, Belleville, and London, as well as our two main yards in Prescott and Mississauga. We have a fleet of about 275 trucks, and we run cross-border as well as up and down the Toronto-Quebec corridor, or Ontario-Quebec corridor, I should say. We run dry vans, reefers, some Tridem reefers, and we have a small drayage division as well with some chassis.
Nice. One of the things that you're well known for, and I want to start by asking about this, is your program for bringing in new entrant drivers. Everybody knows big shortage in the industry, and the fleets that are really stepping up to help new entrants come into the industry really, I think, deserve a lot of credit and really need to make sure they're doing things the right way. And you guys have always had a really strong program for that. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing for new entrants, in particular things like apprenticeship, your apprenticeship program, tuition reimbursements, and things like that. So talk to us about how you make that work.
Sure. So as you said, it's difficult to bring drivers into the industry, and a lot of companies will only hire experienced. But we believe that in order to give people a fair shot, we need to, in order to grow the number of drivers in the industry, someone needs to, for lack of a better term, take a chance on newly licensed drivers, but also make sure that before we put them in the truck on their own, that we're sure that they're going to be safe out there. So we do hire newly licensed. We do, as you said, have a tuition reimbursement program. We make sure that they sit through a orientation where we talk not just about Kriska, but also give them kind of a refresher on things that they would have learned when they went through the training school. Then we put them out with a driver trainer. So they're in a cab with one of our experienced drivers for anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how much time they need. We, there's certain tests that they have to pass before we're comfortable letting them in the truck by themselves. Once they are once they've completed that, we still feel like, that first trip that you make on your own, how nerve-wracking that can be. So we actually put them with somebody to shadow them. So dispatch will find 2 loads going to the same customer, and we will have an experienced driver shadow them en route. So they have somebody that they can ask questions to at any point. If they get into trouble at any point, that driver can help them. They help them with the processes at the consignee. They help them make sure that they're planning their trip properly, help make sure that they can find somewhere safe to sleep at night. And we do the same thing on the trip back. So we do that up to 4 weeks, depending on how comfortable the driver is to be out on his own, and how the trainer or the person shadowing them, how comfortable they are saying, yeah, this person is able to go on their own now.
Really nice. And apprenticeship is something that I'm really fascinated by. I mean, it's something that is kind of overdue in the industry. On the US side, there has been recent changes to formalize apprenticeship requirements, but I know you've been doing it for years. So you had really developed a fairly strong program for running people through that and taking advantage of any government subsidies and things like that as well, which is certainly an important part of it. So can you talk a little bit about some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, there has been some changes to the government subsidies over the years. So we're not able to partake in it as much as we used to be able to. You know, we do feel that driving a truck is a skilled trade, no different than becoming a mechanic or some of the other trades. And it's important that the government recognizes that. So that's something that we're hoping that, you know, they'll look at in more depth as we move forward. So, but we were a big, I think we were perhaps the first carrier to participate in the apprenticeship program when it did run. And then it's become, through COVID and other things, it became more and more challenging, if I'm being honest, to work with the government agencies.
Okay.
But you hire a lot of drivers of different ethnic backgrounds too, don't you?
We do, yeah. So, and we are expanding that. We have been going out looking at most of the drivers that we hired over the last few years have been Southeast Asian, but now we're moving into other schools as well, looking at different ethnicities as immigration now starts again post-COVID, as more people are beginning to immigrate to Canada again.
And how do you handle the difference in language?
So, you know, we do have a lot of people on staff who are from the same background as some of the drivers. So we do ensure we have a driver services program, so a driver service reps, who the drivers, basically it's their main point of contact. If they have any questions, they're free to certainly reach out to anybody in the company, but they know that if they don't know where to go for the answer, they can go to the driver service rep and they will answer it for them. And we try and pair people up that have the same, that come from the same culture or speak the same language. So we do a lot of that to help through the transition.
I remember you telling me that during the interview, and I thought that's just brilliant. That way they can get answers in a way that they understand it. But it doesn't just stay at your driving. It also influences your social events, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we like to have fun. Mark Seymour, our owner, that's the one thing he's always saying, make sure that, you know, you work hard, but you have fun doing it. And we like to eat, and we're always having a lot of different social events. Actually, it's our 45th anniversary this year. So we just had a week-long celebration in Prescott a couple of weeks ago where we served various food throughout the week. And next week we're having our celebrations in Mississauga. So we're having multicultural food throughout the week. We did have one gentleman, a Chinese gentleman driver, who we wanted to celebrate Chinese New Year. So he actually came in and helped us decorate and helped us choose the menu, what food we were going to serve, had little gifts for everybody. And he helped us do all that.
Oh, nice. Very nice. And you also get families involved, don't you, with some of your social and contests?
Yes, absolutely. During this 45th anniversary, the celebrations we had here in Prescott, on one day we asked people to bring their family and friends, and we served food to everyone. We had somebody here, a local talent, singing and playing the guitar. And we'll do the same thing in Mississauga next week. We had a coloring contest we said for kids of all ages. So we actually had some 30-year-olds, you know, coloring it and said, oh, I'm still a kid. So we had a coloring contest, which was, it was fun. It was difficult though, because it's hard to pick winners, right? So we had to, ultimately we had to pick a few winners, but that was the challenging part.
Nice. And you even do a facility tour for new families, right?
We do, yes. You know, it's a big, especially with newly licensed drivers, it's a change for them, but it's also a change for their family as well. You know, knowing that their spouse is going to be out on the road for a week, they want to be able to see, what their living conditions are going to be. So what does their truck look like when they do make it back to the terminal? Are they going to be able to have somewhere where they can take a hot shower, grab, a quick bite to eat, or healthy snack, because we provide healthy snacks and water to the drivers. Are they going to have laundry facilities, things like that? So it's important that the families see where they're going to be, where their spouse is going to be spending a great deal of their time.
I love that connection. I find that so often you think of it being one person, but it affects the entire family, as
Absolutely.
you say. So just love that.
Actually,
Perfect.
when we interview drivers before we decide whether or not to hire them, especially with newly licensed, we explain to them, this is what your week is going to look like, to make sure that they're prepared, and say, make sure that you go back and tell your family, you spoke with Kriska and we have told you that this is what you can expect. This is how many days you can expect to be gone away from home, and the things that challenges you may face on the road, that, you may call your spouse and say, this is what happened to me today. And you need to make sure that your wife is going to be supportive of that as well. So we make sure that we try and educate them on, this is what to expect in this industry before they agree to come on board.
That's
fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really cool. You're talking about supporting people and educating people. One of the other places where I know you've spent a lot of time educating is the whole business of parking and making sure that customers are educated. So talk a little bit about some of the things that you do to make sure drivers, are supported on the road when they need to park.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we put directions in our system for all of our customers, and often we will call the customer to get the directions versus relying on Google Maps, but then we'll reference the two too, because depending where you're going, you could be speaking to a person at a customer who takes the subway to work or the bus to work, so doesn't know, the truck route. So the first thing we do is, let's look at Google Maps and let's call and see if, put the two together and find the best route. But we also want to make sure we're talking to them to ask, can our driver sleep there? If they can't sleep there, then we're also going back to the customer to say why, and explain why it's so important. If they can't sleep there, we'll ask, what is the closest truck stop to your facility? We have even, one of our customers, this was a few years ago now, one of their initiatives was to better the lives of, I can't remember what it was now, so many million people in the world. And I said, well, I can tell you how you can better the lives of truck drivers by making sure that they have somewhere to sleep, and just as importantly, making sure they have facilities that they can use. You don't want them sleeping somewhere where then they don't have any facilities to use. So we had a big project that we worked on with one customer, and they were able to roll it out throughout their many facilities in the US as well as globally as well.
So I want to stop on that one for a little bit, because that's a really smart approach. All of these large companies have got these sort of social consciousness programs that they're doing, and they've got these great mission statements about how they're saving the world. But so often that kind of gets disconnected by the time it gets down to the driver who's picking up all of their loads there. So
Absolutely.
You actually connected those two and pointed out to them that they need to deliver on their own taglines, basically on their own commitments. If they're going to be helping people, or if they're going to be talking about improving things, they need to be making life better for drivers as well. That's a really good approach. Yeah. I really like that.
It depends on what type of market we're in, but there's times where it's hard to find capacity, and it's educating the shippers on how they can become shippers of choice. If with the driver shortage, oftentimes it comes down to the driver being able to choose what load he wants to take versus us telling him what load he or she is going to take. So it's very important that you become a shipper of choice, because if there's not enough drivers and trucks available and you don't treat the driver well, your freight may be the load that's sitting.
Have you seen that attitude changing in the past year or so as the freight market has shifted?
Fortunately, the customers that we've had those conversations with that have made changes certainly haven't reverted back. But it is getting more difficult to push that initiative on new customers that you bring on, because they know that there is capacity out there right now.
Yeah, so you have to choose the customers that you work with in order to get the good ones.
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Tammy, you just said when talking about the drivers, he or she, and you have the Kriska Network of Women. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so, going back to trying to find somewhere safe to sleep and somewhere to use facilities, that's important for our male drivers, but I hate to say more so, but just as important for our female drivers. They face different challenges, right? And I think no different than, as you said before, with different nationalities, it's nice for them to have somebody of their own ethnic background or that speaks their language to be able to talk through struggles. The same goes for women in the industry, given that they are a minority in the industry. They'd like to talk to people who face the same challenges as they do. Do they face more harassment with, at the shippers? Do they face different challenges in trying to find facilities to use? So we have this group of women that we get together and they just talk through their challenges, either just challenges as in the industry as a whole as a driver, or challenges that may be more specific to females in the industry.
Oh, nice. And so is it just drivers then, or is it throughout the organization?
It's more related to drivers' concerns, but certainly we have females within the organization who are not drivers that will rotate through these meetings so that they're there to ask questions or, be able to maybe take some of the information that they're hearing back to our customers or back to the management team to see if we can help in any way.
Terrific. I really love that you do that. It feels good to know that that's happening, and it's probably pushing the industry into more acceptance of female drivers and making it easier for them to want to come on board.
Absolutely. 7% of the drivers that we hired this year were female. And I believe in total, it's about 5% of our 4.5 or 5% of our drivers are female.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Those are good numbers.
They are.
Yeah, because that has been a challenge in the industry for a long time, is getting those numbers up. So are there specific things that you've changed as an organization based on feedback from that group?
Again, I think it's just when drivers do apply at Kriska, they may know that we have more females. We do a lot of social media, so they may see that on social media, or certainly if a female calls, we can say, glad to hear from you, and let them know that we have a high percentage of female drivers. So in their minds, they're assuming that we're doing something right to be able to have that number of female drivers.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
Excellent.
very cool. Yeah. Okay.
And regarding all of your drivers, post-collision, you said something during the interview that you were the first company who said it to me. And I think only one of very, very few. You said you look after the driver. Your first concern was the driver. Talk to us about how you handle post-collision, because that was a really unique approach, as opposed to examining what happened and possibly bringing you into training. You have a process for looking after your drivers.
Yeah, so obviously the first thing we want to do is make sure the driver is okay, and make sure if there was another vehicle involved that everybody there is okay as well. And, once you have experienced a collision, whether you were at fault or you were not at fault, obviously there can be a lot of trauma there. And the next time you go out on the road, you could be more nervous or, so we want to make sure that we're coaching them and that we're talking to them. We're offering them, we have an EAP program that they're able to speak with somebody if they need that. We can bring them in for some remedial training. We can, oftentimes we've sent them out again with somebody else with one of our trainers, so they can travel with one of the trainers just to get more comfortable in the truck again. We can send them out with a shadow again, just making sure that mentally and physically that they're okay. And because we don't want to send somebody back out in a truck, obviously if they're physically injured, but also mentally if they don't feel that they're prepared for it, whether it was their fault or the fault of the other party involved.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We see a lot of people that look at sort of primarily the incident itself, and they'll go through it, and once they sort of clear the driver that it wasn't his or her fault, then okay, you're clear, here's your next load, get rolling. But there's a lot of other stuff that happens there, and like you say, it may not even be their fault, but if you have a situation where something really unpleasant happened, even if it's not their fault, they could still be scarred by it and reluctant to get out on the road again. So that's important to spend that time with the trainer.
Absolutely. And a lot of times too, we'll say, listen, why don't we give you, this short run? I'm not going to send you 800 miles down the road when, you might feel fine when you leave, but 200 miles into it, you may not be feeling okay. So let's just send you from Mississauga to Montreal, where we have lots of drivers in between that and lots of terminals in between that you can stop should you need to and help ask for assistance.
Interesting. So you have almost like a sort of a return to work type program where you step them back in sort of stages to get back to the point where they're feeling comfortable again.
Yes. Yeah. And again, not in all cases, because in some cases people are like, no, I feel absolutely fine. But if there's any hesitation at all, any doubt at all, we take those extra steps.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. And you also have a really interesting program where your drivers can shadow non-driver rules.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So two reasons we do this. So if oftentimes we'll have drivers come in and they'll sit with dispatch, or they can sit in other departments and watch what they do during the day. Two reasons. We're always looking for talent that may, they may not be interested in driving anymore, but they want to stay in the industry and they want to stay with Kriska. So they can sit with somebody inside to say, you know what, I'd really like to learn how to dispatch, or you know what, no, that's not for me. And there have been times in the past where there has been conflict between, let's say, a dispatcher and a driver. Well, you know what? We send dispatchers out. We haven't since COVID, so it's something we have to get back into, but we have the dispatchers do a ride along with the drivers. But you know what? We're going to flip it around. You as a driver are going to do a sit down along with a dispatcher and see what their day is like.
Oh, how smart is that? Experience the other person's world.
That's something I think is really underused in the industry. There's a lot of effort we see, like you say, for management to do ride-alongs with drivers. And that's a great way for management to get out there and see what a driver's day is like. And that builds a bond with the driver when they're out on the road. But it's just as valuable to go the other way, because drivers are so disconnected from what's happening in the office. They don't really have a clear picture of what's going on in the company, and they have all of these perceptions about how easy it is for operations sitting there in the office all day, and to hear them talk, the operations spend their day devising new ways to screw over drivers. And of course, we all know that's not the case. There's just the reality of work is very different in an office. So having those people actually sit in there and pay attention to it, and yeah, they may be looking at it as a potential career, but it's just, even without that, it's so eye-opening for them to see what people are doing and get a perspective of how the actual department works, how the job functions. It's going to give them a totally different perspective on their own work with operations when they get back on the road. So I really think more companies should be doing it. You're one of, I think in 15 years of Best Fleets, you're one of maybe 3 companies I've come across that has done that. So, which is why you're a Best Fleet, of course. No, but it's a great idea. And there was another thing that jumped out for me as well on the education side, and that was management development. the extra training that you're doing for your frontline staff. So talk a little bit more about some of that.
And so we hired an outside company to provide training for inside staff. So every one of our employees, non-driving staff, and any drivers who, may have been in the area on those days that wanted to join, was able to join. And we had different topics. So, there was a diversity topic. There was how to handle difficult conversations, several different topics. And as I said, every single person, every non-driving staff had to sit through these sessions. We had, they were given a schedule, and there was 2 they could choose from. We served lunch to everybody on those days. And then we had a follow-up session with just those who had direct reports. So all of our supervisors and managers, and it was the same theme, but just in more detail. So instead of a 2-hour session, it was a 4-hour session, getting more granular on what we learned, so that they could then follow up with their staff to say, hey, this is what you learned, but here's some extra tools for your toolbox, or it gave them a way to measure if there was improvement in different areas with their team based on the fact that they had training beforehand, and then they had more in-depth training. The managers and supervisors had more in-depth.
Nice.
Interesting. I like that.
Is that something that you think you'll continue doing, or revisiting in the future, or was it?
We will revisit. We will definitely revisit it in the future. Yeah. Does everybody need, as I said, we had all non-driving staff participate in it. I think we found that maybe not everybody needed that. So we may shrink that, not to be disrespectful or anything, but maybe the cleaner doesn't need that training. So we may streamline it a little bit as to who gets the training.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes these things you got to sort of start it with everybody, and then you realize that you can refine it to specific groups.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool.
It's so great though that you do this semi-annual training for your drivers, but you're also training everybody on how to interact all the way along, top to bottom. Wonderful.
Yeah, and it was some good conversations. You can tell there's certain people that are going to be quiet and not speak up regardless, but there's other people who I thought might not say much, but they actually got very involved in it. And there was some good debate, because we talked about, when you talk about things like diversity, you can really get into some strong opinions on certain things. So, but I think at the end, everybody came to a common ground or a common understanding anyway.
Fantastic.
Nice. Yeah.
Perfect.
So this kind of leads a little bit into discussion of different driver interests and how you support them. And we have some questions that talk about how you support driver interests and how drivers get involved in your community programs and things like that. And one of the things that stuck out for me that I don't think I've ever seen before is in terms of supporting drivers' outside interests, you had a driver that had some time off for a political campaign. And so I think are the first fleet I've come across that had a driver running for office somewhere. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to say that he was successful. So he is a counselor in one of our local municipalities. And he's worked for Kriska for probably over 20 years, maybe even closer to 25 years. And he's actually a farmer as well. So he takes about 4 weeks off a year to attend to, he's a cash crop farmer. So he takes about 4 weeks off a year to plant his fields or in the fall to gather his crops. And then he's like, I know I've already pushed the limit because I always ask for this extra time off to do my farming gig, but now I'm asking for some extra time off for my political gig. So we allowed that. And he works at one of our terminals that's about 5 minutes from my house. So I would stop in there often to drop off snacks for them or pick up paperwork or whatever. And if he was there, he'd always say, okay, can I practice my speech with you? Absolutely. And, try and give him some pointers. So, and then obviously we congratulated him on his win. And now most of his meetings are at night, but he does have some events during the day that he has to attend. So we do schedule his shifts around that.
Even the evening meetings, you're going to have to schedule the week around that, it would seem.
Yeah. He works local, so he works daytime hours, but there's times he does have to leave. He does have to leave early for the day. Yeah.
So the result of that has got to be somebody who's very much committed to the organization and is definitely feeling very supported, and that's going to send a message to a lot of other drivers as well, and that's going to help sort of morale. I mean, other drivers must love that fact that they've got somebody, they know that that's an opportunity for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic.
In your driver performance evaluations, this leads into this beautifully, because you used a term that we don't hear very often. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. You said you discuss mutual expectations. And I thought, that's fantastic. It's not about this is what we need from you or this is what we demand. It's a mutual expectation.
Well, what's different about that is we see a lot of fleets do that right at the beginning when they hire a driver. So at the end of orientation, let's do this expectation exchange. What do we each want from each other? And then they go off and then they never speak of it again. But the fact that you sort of make that part of the regular review is very uncommon. So how does that work? And how's that benefiting the company?
Yeah, so like you said, with other companies that do it at the beginning, we do that as well. We do the 30, 60, 90-day reviews with them and ask them, are you getting what you expected from Kriska or from the industry if they're a newly licensed driver? But then, when we have our regular reviews with them, we ask those questions as well. Like, are you satisfied with the number of miles you're getting? Are you happy with the type of communication that you're getting from us, or would you like to see more of it? Are you happy with the new truck that you got 3 weeks ago? We ask those kind of questions as well and get feedback. We actually just started a new program with our driver services as well, that they randomly choose, I can't remember, I think it's 25 drivers monthly, and just send them a message and ask them to call. And they just say, just a quick survey. Are you satisfied overall? Are you satisfied, not satisfied, or somewhat satisfied with your miles? Are you satisfied, not satisfied, or somewhat satisfied? Just like three questions. So now we're gathering that information as well. And then of course, if they say that if they don't say they're satisfied, then we ask follow-up questions to that as well.
Nice.
Oh, fantastic.
I love the idea.
That's something new that we just started that about 3 months ago. Nice. In addition to the reviews.
Yeah, I love the idea that the review is also a bit of an employee survey as well at the same time. So you're kind of covering both sides of it, and then supplementing with this really must give you a good perspective on where things are going and the sort of the feel of the audience.
Right, and then we have an email group. It's called retention. So if something is brought up in the meeting that is of great concern, then the driver service person will send that to the retention committee. So everybody on that committee knows, okay, this is a concern, and let's talk about this at our next meeting. But it gives everybody kind of a heads up that this is a concern, so they can come to the meeting with already knowing that and with some ideas of how we can improve in those areas.
Really nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And as I recall, benchmarking, you give out gift cards for top performers, but you do that a little differently too.
Yeah, so we use Isaac as our satellite system in our communication with the drivers, and we've worked with them to develop a report card, and that report card consists of measuring them on their driving behavior. So how many times did they hard brake in the month? How many times did they take a corner too quickly? What percentage of the time did they idle? and then they get a score. And if they get over 85, so we have 3 different categories that they can score, they get an Amazon gift card. And we also tie into that, we have speed gauge. So we want to make sure that our drivers aren't speeding. So, we're governed, the trucks are governed, but that doesn't mean, when you're in a 60, you can't speed. So speed gauge makes sure that they're not speeding regardless of what the speed zone is. So we tie those 2 together, giving them a score at the end of the month. It's more of a safety score. And as I said, they can get an Amazon gift card, and they really challenge each other. We post the highest scores, and they all are aiming to do better than their buddy. If they aren't successful in getting that gift card, then there's times that it's the spouse that's calling us to say, how come they didn't get their gift card? 1, because they want the gift card, but 2, they're concerned because they know it's a safety scorecard. So, what was my spouse doing that was unsafe? Because I want them to come home at the end of the week. So obviously we have to be careful because we can't discuss employees' behaviors, but it is funny the number of calls we sometimes get. And again, that's it's nice that spouses feel comfortable to call us because they have relationships with a lot of us in the office as well. So.
That goes back to what you were talking about right at the beginning about including the families more in everything. So you build more of a relationship with the sort of larger community around that driver, which that's got to contribute to the stickiness as well and keeping them retained. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Okay, so we're coming up on time for this, but before we get to wrap it up, you've been involved in the Best Fleets program for several years now, and I know you have a process of sort of going through it each year. So can you talk a little bit about what you guys do to sort of get ready to go through it, and how you approach the questionnaire and all of that stuff?
Sure. So we will look at the previous year's survey and start with that and see how we scored the previous year and what areas we need to work at. So, obviously we don't wait until the next year's application comes out. We start working on that right away, so that if there's things that we need to change or programs that we feel that we should be addressing, we can do that right after the previous year's results come out versus waiting until, okay, let's scramble and get something ready for this year. And we do that. We start with in our management meetings doing that. So we actually take one management meeting and dedicate it to going through the Best Fleets results from the previous year and talk about, maybe we didn't do a great job answering this because we got a 2 out of 4 on this side. And we know that we should have scored better than this, but we forgot to put this, or we should have worded this differently. We also then will take that and get other people in our departments involved. So if it's something revolving recruiting, we'll say to the recruiting manager, okay, take these questions to your recruiting team and ask them, or is there something that we're forgetting that we haven't told Best Fleets about? Or is there something that, based on the feedback from Best Fleets, is there something that we could be tweaking to do differently? And then once each person, because we assign the different questions to who we think the owner should be, they will retweak that question and come back, and then we'll have at another management meeting, one of the final ones before we submit our entry, we go through it all again. Because oftentimes we find when you do something day in and day out, you kind of forget some of the things that you may do. You just do them automatically and you don't give it a second thought. Yep. So it's important for other managers to say, hey, but you guys do this as well. And oh yeah, okay, I'm going to add that. So I think last year we did a better job at that, in particular because we had 2 new managers. So they had come to Kriska and we're just learning our processes and procedures. So first of all, it was great that they were able to give input because they saw things that we did from a fresh set of eyes that we just assumed everybody was doing, and they realized everybody wasn't doing it. Mm-hmm. Second of all, it was great for them to learn about Kriska because everybody was saying this is what we do. And so they got to learn about other departments that they weren't involved in that way.
Nice. Yeah, that's a very good process. Very good process. Okay, so that I think we'll wrap it up. Any last thoughts or comments before we close out the recording here?
Just, you know, appreciate your time, appreciate all that you do, because it really does make Kriska and other carriers who participate sit back and look at their processes and think about what really matters, and think about what more we can do for our drivers, because without them, none of us would be here. So I appreciate your time as well.
Well, I think that's a great sentiment to end on. So thanks very much, and we'll have the recording posted soon.
Great, thank you.
And happy anniversary, Tammy.
Thank you.